The child was born but couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history in this land of flowers.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network, the week that was on the 26th of August 2017. Let me bring you up to date very quickly on some of the news of Friday, and then we'll go to Hurricane Harvey, which has been downgraded to a Category 2. We'll get that live feed from the Weather Channel in a minute here. But first to something that was predictable, DJ Trump, the pardoning of Sheriff Joe Apollo. Anyway, nonetheless, that was one of his allies out of jail. He was going to jail for 6 months, possibly up to 6 months. The hearing would have been, the sentencing actually part of it would have been in October. And as far as the fallout from what they term here, this is the Washington Post we're reading from, Abby Phillips there and Devon Beret. Anyway, nonetheless, the pardon is perhaps the only way to make Apollo, one of Apio, excuse me, I don't know why I mispronounced his name here. He's from Boston, a longtime county sheriff who gained national fame as a bigot. They call it aggressive pursuit of undocumented immigrants. Well, anyway, Apio is the latest chapter in the line of historically controversial pardons by presidents. Well, Joe Arpaio is a different type of person than some of the others, and they give examples here of President George H.W. Bush, Caspar Weinberger. I think Caspar Weinberger did now. That was in 1972 on his way out of office. But Arpaio's pardon, the first for DJ Trump. Normally presidents do this with a lot of fanfare at the end of the year, holiday pardons, whatever you want to call them. This Joe Arpaio character had been the sheriff in Maricopa County. That is basically Phoenix for a very, very long time. But old Arpaio, he's 85 years old, and he's out of business now, period. And that is the end of Joe Arpaio. And from the ACLU, that's the American Civil Liberties Union, they call it pardon the presidential endorsement of racism. It wouldn't be the first time DJ Trump endorsed Nazis, white supremacists, and whatever by equating the action in the murder of Heather Heyer as a 50-50 operation. That is an old battle cry of reactionaries, been around a long time, both sides of the blame, which is a bunch of bullshit. That's the only way we can put it there. And from Cecilia Wong, she is an official of the ACLU, DJ Trump has chosen lawlessness over justice, division over unity, hurt over healing. But that's not a problem. You have to understand that this administration does not have any type of stake in what was normally termed justice nor unity. It's in disunity as far as healing. They're not interested. But the reason that this is happening is the Republican Party. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. If the Republican Party did not, 89, 90% of whatever, back DJ Trump would not be taking these types of actions. That is basically it. That party goes back to Pat Buchanan in modern times in 1968 and the so-called Southern strategy, period. And this is just part of what they have been doing for a very, very long time, and nothing is different there. So old Sheriff Joe Arpaio is now out of it from Ruben Galileo. He's a Democrat a representative from Arizona who represents Phoenix. Trump should at least have the decency to explain to the American public why he is undermining our justice system. Well, he did it on a Friday night when a hurricane was coming in there. We'll get to that in a minute. Arpaio was scheduled for his sentencing on the 5th, and he faced up to 6 months in prison, which doubtfully he would have got 6 months at 85, period. But that is one of the situations there from Vanita Gupta. She's the executive director of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. The president yet damaged himself to rule the law of the country tonight. This pardon sends a dangerous message that law enforcement officers who abuse his position of power and defy the court order can simply be excused by a president who himself clearly does not respect the rule of law. Well, there's no doubt about this. That has been a strain again back to the Republican Party and its attitude towards the legal system. If it is one of the things that promotes their particular interests, they enforce it. We talked the other night about what happened in Maryland, sending people to debtor's prison. That was Kirshner there from his real estate ventures, some 9,000 in Maryland alone. These were people that courts had said that owed back rent. Some of them did not, and using the courts as a collection agency. And there is a string of thought out there that some people, well, if they owe the rent, therefore they should go to jail. Well, this is the same thing with Joe Arpaio. Just being the sheriff of Maricopa County, an advocate for Trump, he was also an advocate, if you recall, for the Bircher movement too. He was going to investigate that. He spoke at the Republican National Convention, big Republican. The men seem to have the same view on illegal immigrants and the harsh tactics against criminal suspects. Arpaio is known in part for his forcing inmates to wear pink underwear and sleep outdoors in a tent city. These are the types of publicity stunts that kept him in there, but he was unceremoniously kicked out of the office. As the late, great Senator Kennedy would say, he would put out a business sign on Joe Arpaio. You won't hear very much from Joe anymore. Old Joe, is, as they say, is at home, period. And the critics of this policy detaining people on mere suspicion was racist. No doubt about that, but it played to a community in Phoenix. But that community is vanishing, and the city is moving to be a much more progressive city. It's not the city that was ruled by Barry Goldwater in the 60s in the Goldwater movement, the Birches. Those people have moved on to Idaho and what have you, some to Nevada, Las Vegas area. Those are people that have moved out of Los Angeles years ago and into Arizona. And of course, you have people from other parts of the country there also. So this is one of the issues that will be out there for a very, very long time period. We'll get to Gary Coyne in a minute. Gary Coyne is a national director of National Council National Economic Council. We'll get it straight in a second here, and we'll see what is going on with that. The Financial Times has a statement from his team to Mr. Mueller. He has issued subpoenas to lobbying firms as part of the Russian probe that he is engaged in, Robert Mueller, that is. In case you missed it, I believe we talked last night about this. DJ Trump directed the Pentagon to ban transgender service people, prohibiting sex reassignment surgeries, they call it now. Transgender people have been around the military for quite some time, and they will remain there. Multiple missiles launched from the Democratic Republic of Korea there, and at the same time the U.S. and the Republic of Korea have a huge exercise going on. I'm not sure about this C-SPAN. A little roundup here. C-SPAN caller confessed his racism to a African-American guest. A year later, he called back to say how he had changed. Oh, well, doesn't matter right there. The Mayweather-McGregor fight, polls showing boxing holding its own in the face of lower. This is a UMass Lowell poll. 57% of boxing fans are, let's see, MMA. I suppose these are the divisions within the two conferences here. The MMA isn't stealing boxing's popularity, and you check out what this is. Sports finally go head-to-head. This is McGregor and Floyd Mayweather Jr. in the boxing ring, and the MMA and boxing are actually neck and neck in the country in terms of popularity. Not a good thing for boxing. The bout is expected to be the most watched combat sport event ever and could set the viewership records in 29 countries. Of course, you can see $15 in Japan. And let's see, nearly 2 in 5 Americans. Well, that is in that circle there. The Ultimate Fighting Champion started from scratch in 1993, exploded in the mid-90s. The company was sold last year for $4.2 billion there. That is the UFC championship, and this was part of the Lowell Mass study here. 54% of boxing fans are fans of MMA, while 59% of MMA, and I've not figured out what MMA is at this. They should define their terms, I suppose. Top rank. Oh well, anyway. Top rank is anyway. This is top rank here. Showdown is a pop culture event. Odds makers peg the batch. MFC superstar situation here. Not certain about all of this. Definition of terms. Okay. I'm supposing what they're talking about here is, let me just check very quickly here, and we'll go to something of substance, part of, I guess, you'd say our sports. We have Uncle Carl Robe coming up shortly here. Also, mixed martial arts. Okay, anyway. Mixed martial arts, I recall Muhammad Ali fought some mixed martial arts type. Anyway, let's very quickly go to the Weather Channel here in Harvey.
expecting to see. Still, catastrophic flooding rain is expected, with this system basically stalling out through the middle of the week. An unprecedented event is unfolding tonight in Texas as the eye continues to push inland, and we are seeing already record-breaking water levels. There's a look at Port Lavaca, where they are over 5.5 feet. This is a very dangerous storm, life-threatening, and we are looking at the latest right now with the 2 o'clock advisory. The storm has weakened some, but this is still a strong Category 3, winds of 125 miles per hour. The forward speed has slowed down. That's important because flooding is going to be a major issue with the slow speed of this storm. Here's a look at the cone, and you can see it's going to continue to push further inland. So San Antonio, stand by. You are still going to be in the worst of this storm. Storm surge is becoming a very severe thing. The National Hurricane Center has issued its very first ever storm surge warning. Storm surge over a foot is expected with this storm over the next 24 hours. Severe weather has already started. Tornado watches are in effect, and we are expecting spin-ups throughout the day on Saturday. And some of the worst impacts we are expecting with this is still flooding rain. We could see as much as 33 inches in Victoria. And Houston, you could get as much as 28 inches.
That is a lot of rainfall in that area there. Again, we'll quickly go to the latest here, and from the Weather Channel, where we're getting this information in live on Hurricane Harvey. 40 inches of rain, catastrophic to southeast Texas. Story there made landfall near Rockport at 130 miles an hour.
The wrath of Hurricane Harvey is going to live on for days to come. There's a look at Fulton, Texas. Winds are whipping. We've seen wind gusts as high as 130 miles and sustained winds over 100. Destruction is becoming widespread through Texas, and we're only expecting more. Here's a look at the latest. It is now down to a Category 2 storm. This is still a monster of a storm. Winds are 100 miles per hour. It's moving off to the northwest at 6 miles an hour. Tornado watch is in effect for a good portion of Texas right now. Here's a look at the latest with the cone. Important to note, tonight, we are still talking about Harvey being a hurricane, so this is going to be slow to weaken. But once it does, it's not going to go anywhere fast. We're looking at this system meander over the southeastern part of Texas for the next several days. Here's a look at the storm surge, and we do have a storm surge warning in effect for much of the coast. We could be looking at as much as 9 feet of storm surge in some cases. Now, here's a look at the rainfall that we are expecting to see still.
Now, that was the rainfall. We'll go to the BBC's coverage here of Hurricane Harvey. I talked to a friend of mine earlier tonight in Houston. They were preparing there for this storm moving in. This coverage is 2 hours old at the BBC, but yet still a very big storm in the Houston area. They were out of bread. She told me that evidently the bakers will be busy to make sandwiches. That's in the event of power loss. But the storm has moved from a Category 4 down to a Category 2. But trees, power lines down in Corpus Christi. That is one of the cities affected by it. And as more coverage come in there, surge, she talked about surge of 4 meters. That's 12 feet. That's from the National Hurricane Center. They now talk about surge. Dan Rather, who a man that knows storms, he started out in the 50s covering storms and was talking about this being a very, very large storm. and also tornadic, where we're going with it. So we'll have that going on. Cruise ships here, 20,000 passengers on 3 cruise ships have been unable to debank in Galveston, Texas. Normally what happens with ships, they usually move out to sea. The Houston Chronicle reported the passengers on one ship might need to stay out at sea until midweek, and that's not unusual. The safest place to be is out at sea in these types of activities there. And as we get more information, we'll go to the Houston Chronicle. That is the paper in Houston, Texas. A headline, people stuck out there. Hospitals move patients ahead of Harvey. This is some of the information coming in. Power outages reported in the wake of Harvey here. Wheelchair Abbott has asked for a state of emergency there. Hundreds of thousands of households without power in the Texas Gulf Coast. The Electricity Reliability Council said that was at 1 a.m. this morning. I'm assuming they had 211,000 customers without power there. This is around a place called Rockport. The highest loss is in Corpus Christi, 160,000 customers without power. That would normally, and Central Point Energy is reporting 25,000 in the Houston area. Not as bad yet, but these winds do cause a lot of problems, period. And you can sign up, I guess, from Central Point for outage updates coming. Records floods from Wheelchair Abbott here. DJ Trump has issued a federal disaster declaration in the area affected in Texas. Now, advises Houstonians to evacuate. The local mayor there, Sylvester, what was his name? His name just passed up here. Had said not yet. What they don't want to happen in Houston is obvious. They don't want thousands of people driving out onto the highways at once there. So that in itself, Sylvester Turner also cautioned against evacuation. There are a number of people who are in Houston in Harvey's direct path. Evacuation orders have been given to them. Turner said, but for the Houston area, this is a rainmaker for us. There's no need for people to be thinking about putting themselves in a greater danger. Now, 2005, Hurricane Rita at that time, the immense evacuation led to a gas line shortage and massive traffic jams. At least 120 people died, including 23 who were killed in a bus crash near Dallas. So that we don't want to be repeated out of Houston, Texas. Now let's move on here. A little bit behind here. I guess we'll go to Uncle Carl Rowe first. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal on the 24th of August. Good riddance to Steve Bannon. After departing his position as White House chief strategist last week, Steve Bannon told the Weekly Standard that the Trump presidency we fought for and won it is over. The clear suggestion is that DJ Trump's chance of success has followed Bannon out the door, trying to recast his ouster as a personal choice. Bannon bragged, I can fight better on the outside. He promised to crush the opposition, saying that I built a machine on Brett Bart, the former advisor also told of the Bloomberg reporter he was going to war for Trump against his opponents on Capitol Hill, in the media, and in corporate America. Well, he's got a big job cut out for him. some success might not come so easy, just as before. One of Bannon's principal aims will be to replace the GOP congressional leadership by supporting populist primary challengers. The last year, his attempts at political hit on Paul Ryan, from which he recruited a primary challenge and plummeted the speaker daily through the Breitbart news stories, ended with Ryan winning 84% of the vote. Some machine. Bannon also promised that the Breitbart would attack Trump when he deviates from what Bannon believes should be the president's agenda. The website proceeded to do just that after the president's speech on Afghanistan. A high-level Breitbart staff went so far as to tell Vanity Fair that if Trump deviated from the position he ran on, Breitbart would help rally votes for impeachment. I doubt very seriously he'll do that, but it could be a public service. Bannon is not the first staff to believe that the White House agenda must mirror his, but no other aide in memory has had such grandiose or destructive plans for trying to remain in charge after being shown the door. Trump is also engaged in a threat feast from his own party at the rally. This is the one in Phoenix. He exalted Republicans from failing to replace Obamacare rather than expressing confidence that a health care bill would pass eventually. The president also dismissed the senator there, Flake, a critic of DJ Trump. In fact, he's supporting chemtrail, what's her name, as an opponent there. More pointedly, he failed to wish, Senator McCain a speedy recovery. He's probably wishing the best. The difference memo to the White House: the worst way to strengthen the president is to publicly blame difficulties on allies. The least effective way to pass an agenda is to threaten the president's party in Congress. Well, DJ Trump was elected by not the Republican Party, although the Republican Party is the thing propping DJ Trump up, and the media, no doubt about that. Team Trump must grasp the basics of governing. A better approach would be systematic to make the case that the president's proposals are good for the country. Well, that's impossible to do. An example there, DJ Trump's budget cut funds to FEMA. That's an old Republican idea there from the libertarian parts. People like Paulie Ryan, the Speaker, and Rand followers, they believe that the government should basically be in the law enforcement business / military business, basically only, and everything else should be laissez-faire, willy-nilly, or what have you. And therefore, FEMA is not needed. People could insure their properties, but the problem there is in catastrophic situations where you have flooding, etc., billions of dollars of damage. The all states of the world have limited funds. They're not finite. Therefore, when their funds run very, very low, they have to go to reinsurance agencies, and premiums go up. Doesn't work like that. Now, you have a Category 4, which is now a Category 2, but in the season, which is now started, the so-called hurricane season, tornado season, etc., you could have a number of these storms. And if they say there's more than $1 billion damage done in each one, that does affect the economy. And in this particular case, those refineries in that area there are now shut down. The offshore drilling is shut down and less polluting there. And once you shut that stuff down, it takes a while to restart it. So you'll see petrol prices, gasoline prices surging. Also at the same time, DJ Trump has put additional sanctions on the government of Venezuela, which has Citgo, their refinery there, also would hamper that. So in other words, these things would push up the price of petrol. No doubt about that is one of the things that happens. Let me go to Gary Cohen, This is from the Financial Times. It's a transcript on tax reform in Charlotte, I suppose. Interview with, he's the chief economic advisor to DJ Trump on the 24th. What is happening with tax reform? We're completely engaged in tax reform. Starting next week, the president's agenda and calendar is going to revolve around tax reform. He will start being on the road, making major addresses, justifying the reason for tax reform, why we need it in the U.S. At the end of the day, tax legislation has to happen in Congress and the House, the big six, a group of White House officials, leading Republican types, have been meeting to come up with an outline, a skeleton. We have a good skeleton we agree to, and now the chairman, that is Brady, it's time to get the Ways and Means Committee together to push flesh and bone on it, and they need to do it next week when the House comes back in to session. That's after Labor Day. This has been complicated by the president's tweeting attacks. This is from the Financial Times on McConnell and Ryan. We've been working very closely with the Speaker and with the leader, two of the quote-unquote Big Six. We used to have the Gang of Eight, now the Gang of Six. We released a statement at the end of June saying we united in a framework. We intend to move forward in the legislative process. In the next 3 or 4 weeks, a tax bill will be written in the Ways and Means Committee, and the Congress is going to do its own writing of legislation. That is key. We're going to create pieces of legislation we feel that will be enormous buy-in for the committee. So what exactly will you have in a tax bill? On the personal side, we have protection for three big deductions, charitable, mortgages, retirement savings. We want to raise the standard deduction cap, get rid of many of the personal deductions, not going to fly. We want to get rid of the death tax and estate tax, they're basically the same. On the business side, we're proposing to get rid of many of the deductions that companies take right now to lower the taxable income. At the same time, we're starting with a higher corporate tax rate in America, but companies use deductions. We're going to try to do it to get everyone to pay at a lower rate. Revenue may decline in the midterm. Well, that's a big problem right there. Will this include taxes to encourage the repatriation of overseas cash? Yes, we are proposing to go to a territorial system. That means American companies won't have to pay an additional tax when they bring foreign profits back home. Today, they often have to pay additional extra taxes for bringing profits back to the U.S., which means they keep the money offshore. Does this envision repatriation overseas cash with 10% rate, as previously indicated by DJ Trump? We envision imposing a one-time lower tax on those profits. The president has previously indicated that he wants the Ways and Means Committee to cut corporate tax to 15%. Is this? I would like to get the tax rate as low as possible. He's skirting around it there. Can the House Ways and Means Committee really do the legislation in a month? The Senate Finance Committee, for that matter, have been working on tax reform for years. Yes, they have, but they've gotten nowhere. How will the math work to make this compliant with the reconciliation process if there is no BAT? Are you talking about a broader adjustment tax that would impose an extra levy on imports? Do they rely entirely on a dynamic scoring? Won't get too much into this here. To the debt ceiling at the end of the day, Congress has to increase the debt ceiling. Will they do it? It'd be very interesting to see. Will you offer any concessions to get some Democrats on board? If the Democrats want to work with them, I'll forget that. If you look at GDP since 2008, you're averaging about 1.5% growth, including the recession. Before that, we had a much higher growth, but we don't think that 2% growth is good enough. if you go back to the 80s, but that is silly because the economy was much lower there. They're, let's see, 14.4 percentage points more expensive on tax rates. Well, anyway, we won't get into all that mess. Do you consider resigning after Charlottesville? I've come on enormous pressure to both resign to remain in my current position as a patriotic American. Bunch of hooey. I am reluctant to leave my post as director of the National Economic Council because I feel a duty to fulfill my commitment. Citizens standing up for equity and freedom should never be equated with white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and the KKK. I believe the administration must do better in consistently and unequivocally condemning these groups. Can't do it. As a Jewish American, I would not allow neo-Nazi ranting Jews will be replaced to cause this Jew to leave the job. Was your decision to stay influenced by the departure of Steve Bannon? My decisions are my decisions. He lied. Are you acting as a group with fellow moderates like the Deputy Dana Powell? This is a personal issue for us. Is the new chief of staff? He's talking about Kelly. They're bringing discipline. 100% doing a spectacular job. What will happen with infrastructure? We developed an infrastructure piece of legislation as well, but in this calendar, it will mostly come behind taxes. So that is Mr. Cohen, where he is in the scheme of things here. We'll go to sport now. We've already covered the Mayweather mixed arts, whatever you want to call it, out in Vegas. We'll go now to the scores. Yeah, let me just make sure of that. Floyd Mayweather is guaranteed a $100 million purse. Okay. No doubt. Okay, let's get the scores here. I'm assuming he passed his way, and we talked about that last night. Yeah, no doubt. Not sure we get into much a complete guide of it here, but let's do the scores and we'll get back. Whoops. We'll try again unsuccessful here to do it. But this is from Friday night here, and let's see if we can get it done. Nonetheless, in 11, the Mariners were in New York. Mariners 2-1 over the Yankees. The Metros were in Washington. Mets 5. Let's try it again. 4-2 over the Nationals. The Cubbies were in Philadelphia. It was all Phillies 7-1 over the Cubbies. The loser was Quintana. The Twins were in Toronto. Twins are winning 6-1 over the Blue Jays. The Orioles were in Fenway Park, and they had a slugfest there. 16-3 was the score. The line scored 20 hits, 3 errors for the Orioles, and 6 hits and 5 errors for the Sox. The Royals in Cleveland, and they were shut out there 4-0 by Cleveland. The Pirates and Reds in Cincy, a big rivalry there between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. 9-5 was the score, Reds. The Padres and Marlins in Florida. Marlins 8-6 over the Padres. The Rockies in Atlanta 5-2. The Tigers and White Sox on the south side of Chicago. Sox 3-2. The Rays and Cards in St. Louis. Rays pull that one out 7-3. The Giants and D-backs in Arizona. Giants lose again, not unusual there. 4-3 was the final score there. Mr. Cranky was the winner. Mr. Bosch was a loser. Anyway, Fernando Rodney had to save. The Rangers and Athletics in Oakland. Athletics 3-1. The Astros and Angels in California. Astros pulled out. Very good game there. 2-1 was the score. And the Brewers and Dodgers in Los Angeles. LA 3-1 over Milwaukee. So that is the sport, baseball that is. And let's see on this McGregor mess here. We'll call it basically all-time pound-for-pound great. He has 12 world titles. This is Floyd Mayweather in 5 classes, so he's been around. We'll extend the 2-year retirement to 1 fight. This mixed arts, what do you want to call it, type of McGregor, who is crossing over to boxing for the mixed arts operation. Period. Their fans want to see Mayweather said this is just theatrical. It has nothing to do with anything. Not certain. To be honest, the fight makes no logical sense. Mayweather is a legendary boxer and superior defender who will be facing an opponent who is outstanding in the octagon, but is a novice in the ring, making his pro boxing debut. I didn't know he was doing that. Experts view it as an abject mismatch, no doubt. So that it was sanctioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission was something of an upset, but it was, and now they engage in a 12-round junior midweight spectacular that has the world's attention on Saturday night. This is from ESPN. This is a silly match that makes no sense. 49-0, 26 TKOs. That is Floyd Mayweather, and this McGregor 0-0. So in other words, he's never fought. He's 40 years old. That's the only difference there. And a brilliant Hall of Fame legend anyway. McGregor is 29. He's from Dublin, from Ireland at least. Will consider its biggest upset in sporting history. At least when Buster Douglas, if you remember him, knocked out Mike Tyson in 1980. The U.S. Olympic hockey team, upset the USSR when the Jets beat the Colts in Super Bowl III. Jets were football's beating of players anyway. This whole thing, and it's sort of what many sports have went to, virtually nothing. This McGregor character, boxing versus mixed martial arts. The fight is a boxing match, not a mixed martial arts fight, but it hasn't stopped legions from looking at one sport against the other. It's silly because they are different sports, no doubt about that. He's not a boxer. Mayweather lost on him, but it would probably reflect badly on boxing because of Mayweather's statute. Well, it's sort of like with Ali, and one of these characters, he bruised up some veins, I believe, in Ali's legs, but the boxer, that used to be the old argument, the boxer versus the martial arts people. The boxer was always superior. Nonetheless, this will do it for us. We'll go on to Bernie Sanders. He's been on a tour of Indiana, Michigan, I believe. He's there with John Conyers. He's out doing the valuable work. There were some people on Facebook discussing the 2016 race, why Bernie ran in the Democratic Party, which is a logical choice, and some felt that he ran an independent. That would have been just silly. But what the takeaway in that whole saga there was that if Bernie Sanders had been the candidate of the Democratic Party, Bernie would be in the White House. Hillary the Monster Clinton just could not cut the mustard. That was the end of that story right there. And as far as the Green Party, we supported the Green Party 100%, and both politically, financially, you name it. The Green Party did a very good job. It was a small party to begin with. But in terms of Bernie's people that were mad, that could not support the monster, it played out. And a lot of Bernie people stayed home. And another point to make there, they were referring to the national study, very large study, done by the people at YouGov. But YouGov or no YouGov, the situation is that many people that voted for Barack Obama twice did not vote for the monster. That campaign was DOA, very close campaign. But at the same time, that is a schism within the Democratic Party, particularly in California, where you have the corporate Democrats versus the grassroots Democrats. That will continue on. Now, on Friday, the approval rating of one DJ Trump is at 34, and it's a 26% disparity. That is from the Gallup people, and we talked about the battleground. They have him at 42, the same as Rasmussen. I was surprised at that. But they have the Democrats. This is a GWU battleground above 7. Doesn't mean a lot. That was from Thursday. Quantipac had him also at DJ Trump, that is at 35. Reuters had him at 36. YouGov had him at 40. PPP at 40. It's all over the place here in terms of YouGov. Let me get this out. Is the internet-only poll there, and a lot of chatter on that, signal noise, you want to call it, on those two things. And PPP as the Democrats up by 14. We don't look at that very much at this stage of the game. There is Professor Amowitz and his model. We're aware of that with the generic ballot and where it is. But we'll be looking at that in 2018. Nonetheless, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the Monday Morning Quarterback. And we have Numbers Man coming up, and we're finishing the open source report. That's our technical report from WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. Good day.
Divide us up. It is to bring our people together.
Senator Sanders' message has been consistent with working people, and he believes what he says, and you guys are here because you believe in him.
I was there when President Trump came to our factory and told us that all of our jobs would be saved. I was interviewed by NBC News shortly after he was elected. He heard me call him out over holding him accountable for promising he would save those jobs. I hope he hears me again today when I say that we are still holding him accountable.
AT&T, we work for, are making it harder and harder for us to do our jobs. And the worst part is, they don't seem to care whether we're doing a good job or not. All they care about is the bottom line.
When we stand together as black and white and Latino, and when we fight for an agenda and a government that works for all of us, we can do extraordinary things.
I just kind of wanted to give everybody an insight to the struggles that my wife and I face as special needs parents. On November 19th, 2014, my wife, Elizabeth, and I were blessed to welcome our daughter, Autumn Jane, into the world. As blissful as that may have seemed at first, it wasn't without complication. Our healthcare system is flawed. I face low wages, and I have a daughter with special needs who is basically kept alive every day by Medicaid expansion and the Affordable Care Act. I actually just came back from Cincinnati Children's at 5 o'clock this morning and took a nap. Came here to speak. She was admitted last night with pneumonia, which is being covered by Medicaid, thank the Lord. So thank you, Senator Sanders, for your tenacity and your relentlessness and always fighting the good fight. Thank you.
It's not easy to do what he does. It's not easy to get up and talk about something very, very personal. But the truth is that Zach's story is the story of many, many people throughout this country in one form or another. This is a struggling family.
John. How are you?
Great to see you.
I think I knew you when you were a little guy. Your father was carrying you around the Capitol.
That sounds about right.
There are two fundamental human rights in our great democracy. One is that everybody should have health care from the minute they're born.
And we have a president who was equivocal, nice people on both sides. No, there are no nice Nazis. When we stand together, when we have the guts to take on the billionaire class, when we have a vision for a new America, nothing will stop us. Thank you all.